Scientists of Reddit. What's a discovery that should have blown people's minds but somehow got a collective shrug from the world? Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you don't miss any videos. Enjoy watching. Story 1. CRISPR-Cas9 is actual Jurassic Park. People who were born blind have had their sight regained due to genetic tinkering made possible by this biological tech. Mosquitoes can be eliminated, practically eradicating malaria by editing the genes, which are then passed on to offspring, making them sterile. The food can be and has been made more nutritious, as in the case of golden rice, producing more vitamin A in impoverished countries. It's Gattaca in the flesh, and people just shrugged. Edit, a lot of people are asking, why do I still have mosquitoes, or why hasn't this happened yet? And I can say that this technology is still extremely nascent. It's a massive achievement of humanity and another foothold in our ability to shape nature, but it is still inaccurate. Targeting specific genes in different species, let alone our own, is time-consuming and requires many trials to get right. Targeting multiple genes at the same time is exponentially more difficult. Remember that genes are just DNA sequences at random events on the entire chain, and each sequence is rarely actually next to each other on the chain. Some of you have also mentioned that we don't fully understand the effect this would have on not only one species, but all those others that interact with whichever we were trying to alter. In short, it's incredibly high-tech, and with incredible technology comes incredible questions and incredible consequences that need to be considered before fully deploying. Story 2. Induced pluripotent stem cells. Historically, stem cell research used cells derived from embryonic sources. That raises tons of ethical debates. In addition, I believe it can cause issues with the body rejecting cells if they come from someone other than the transplant recipient. Scientists then discovered that you could take ordinary skin cells from a person and expose the cells to certain transcription factors, which effectively reprogram them into stem cells. From there, the cells can be differentiated into specific cell types like cardiac cells, neurons. An example usage would be to take a Parkinson's patient who has lost 95% of the cells of the neuronal pathway involved in motor activity and other things, harvest their skin cells, convert them to stem cells, differentiate them into neurons, and transplant them into the brain, thereby recovering some of the deficits. It's unbelievably fascinating stuff and blew my mind when I first learned about it. I don't think they've even scratched the surface of its potential, especially when you combine it with CRISPR to modify the genetics so you can potentially cure/treat all sorts of diseases. To be fair, it wasn't exactly shrugged off, but I would bet most average people don't know about it. Story 3. I grew up in the midst of the AIDS crisis. It was twice as scary as COVID and 10 times as devastating. The fact that they essentially found a cure and AIDS/HIV is no longer a physical or social death sentence is overwhelming in the best way, and the fact that it's rarely talked about is overwhelming in the worst way. Story 4. I worked on the HPV vaccine. I helped prove you can give it to children and just eliminate that entire disease. Never got to worry about that again. Nobody gives a— half the country apparently hates us for even doing it. Edit, I can't explain how much it means to me for this comment to take off, especially now. Thank you all. Much love. Story 5, not as crazy as other ones, but as a type 1 diabetic, I find it crazy that they can just make insulin. Ha ha ha. You're telling me my organs can't, but somebody in a lab can just find the formula? Ha ha ha. Story 6, neuroscientist here. The fact that we discovered neuroplasticity, your brain physically rewires itself throughout your entire life, should have changed everything about how we approach education, aging, mental health, and personal development. We used to believe your brain was fixed after childhood. Now we know you can literally grow new neural connections at 90 years old. This means learning a language at 60, totally possible. Overcoming depression through targeted brain training, proven effective. Recovering from traumatic brain injuries, far more possible than we thought. Preventing cognitive decline. We have techniques that work, yet we still treat brains like static machines rather than dynamic organs that respond to use. Schools still use outdated teaching methods. Doctors still tell older patients that's just aging instead of prescribing specific neuroplasticity interventions. The most mind-blowing part? You're reshaping your brain right now by reading this comment. But our entire society acts like this revolutionary discovery never happened. It's like discovering how to grow new bones and then ignoring it. Story 7. The invention of the blue LED. That changed absolutely everything in electronics. The blue LED allowed us the final piece needed to produce true white light. Paved the way for everything with a screen. Story 8. I am not a scientist, an engineer with an interest in science, but I think what was pulled off with mRNA vaccines as quickly as it was to counter the pandemic is grossly underappreciated by the majority of the population, as is the development of mRNA technology, a Swiss Army knife-like tool itself, generally any kind of highly complex development like that. And the HPV vaccine mentioned elsewhere in this thread is not sufficiently appreciated by people that don't grasp the complexity of the technology. Story 9. AlphaFold 2 has a very real chance of being the most transformative tool in the history of the biological sciences. It's open source and free to download, which means that any biolab in the world can get a hold of it. And because it's open source, it's easy to adapt to specific situations even more than a CCNN normally is, which is a lot. The research currently being done with AlphaFold's help will shape the entire human experience for decades at least. And it's comparatively brand new. But a lot of people are yelling at the top of their lungs about AI in the abstract, in both directions, and actual developments get drowned out by the vitriol. It feels surreal to know that we may have hit on something comparable in terms of influence on human society to the invention of the clay-filled brick, and no one seems to notice. Edit, I'd like to thank you/Calamity Clambake for asking for an explanation of AlphaFold. They have gotten several different explanations, and all of them take a different approach, and all of them are fantastic. I am firmly of the opinion that there's nothing that's too complicated to understand. There's just ways to understand it that work for some people and not for others. I am pretty sure that now pretty much anyone could get a hold of the ideas behind it because so many people have chipped in with their own version of an explanation, and that makes my heart feel very warm and full today. Story 10. I feel like the James Webb Telescope hype came and went very quickly. I was very hype keeping up with how intricate and difficult it was to design, launch, and deploy that marvel orbiting the sun. If something were to go wrong, very small chance we could fix it. The Hubble's problems we could fix because it was in Earth's low orbit and astronauts could get in there and fix it. While we're at it, add Hubble to that list. And the space shuttle missions. Story 11, the discovery of the memory engram and artificially manipulating memories within the brain. This guy at Boston University was able to not only identify the exact groups of neurons that correspond to an individual memory in the brain, but he was also able to manipulate those memories to delete or artificially create new ones. Really the most sci-fi thing I've heard about in real life. Check out Dr. Steve Ramirez's TED Talk on YouTube. He's a very down-to-earth guy and explains the entire subject fantastically. Story 12, GLP-1S. It's nothing short of revolutionary. Not only does it stabilize blood sugar in diabetics and promotes weight loss for obese people who have no luck with other treatments, it also curbs addictions to alcohol, smoking, even shopping. It has been shown to be protective for cardiovascular health, used for kidney failure. It's a treatment for certain liver diseases, and that's just what we have confirmed so far. In my book, GLP-1S are right up there with penicillin and pasteurization. Story 13. There is strong evidence in neuroscience that a brain is not a single consciousness but contains several consciousnesses. In split brain patients, one side of the brain can know something that the other side doesn't. And one side of the brain will make up stories about why the opposite side did something. It's completely mind-blowing and makes no sense to how we think about ourselves. Story 14, HIV antiretrovirals. Growing up in the 80s, this was a much-needed medication that would have been loudly announced. Maybe it's just me, but it seems like it's just another med. I think it's amazing and am so glad it's saving so many lives. I see ads on my TV, and I'm always amazed at the advances made in that field. Story 15, the fax modem. It was invented in 1843 or so, but sat around for 120 years because everyone just sort of shrugged and didn't really know what to do with it until the internet was invented. Most people think of it as being heavily in use in the 1970s and 1980s and whatever. But no, it's a 19th century invention that got a collective shrug from the cowboys of its day. Story 16, prion disease. People don't really understand it, and so they shrug it off to the point that I have seen people giving away deer meat that was chronic wasting disease positive, and someone picked that meat up to consume. Then I was banned from the group for freaking out about it. Story 17. 140-year-old DNA evidence may have identified the identity of Jack the Ripper. From a February 15th article on the New York Post, English historian and author Russell Edwards said DNA found on a shawl recovered from the scene of one of the killer's vicious slayings was tested, revealing the butcher who terrorized Victorian London's East End in the late 1800s was a 23-year-old Polish immigrant named Aaron Kosminski, who died in a mental institution in 1919. When we matched the DNA from the blood on the shawl with a direct female descendant of the victim, it was the singular, most amazing moment of my life at the time, Edwards told Today in Australia. Story 18. My mind went off in another direction. Judging by all of the hype, we were supposed to be blown away by the invention of the century that would change all of humankind. Come to find out, it wasn't all humankind, just small security. Segue, no one cared. Story 19, it's less a specific technology and more a broad sense, but we've progressed more in the last 5 years than we did in the 200,000 years it took us to get here. We've had fusion reactions, quantum computers, AI. While I dislike the art aspect, has revolutionized how we interact with information, basically. I'm so excited to see what technology will look like in the next October 50th 100 years. I can barely contain my excitement. We've progressed bit information so much that in the next few years, we will need to discover a whole new way of processing information because we've perfected it already. Story 20. The protein folding problem has been largely solved. We can take a string of amino acids and predict the structure with a high degree of accuracy in minutes. This used to take years. The knowledge gained from this will change medicine and evolution in ways that we cannot yet comprehend. Story 21. Frogs can understand human speech, especially English. You can speak to frogs in English and they totally understand you. Some European frogs are more fluent in German and French, but they can still be spoken to. Unfortunately, frogs lack the vocal cords to reply, so they mostly just look at you, but they still get it. Recent studies have indicated that most frogs are socialist, which makes sense considering their social habits. Frogs also prefer Mel Brooks movies. Story 22. Not a scientist, but the theory of inflation, how all matter and energy in the universe was created in the blink of an eye. Small variations at the largest scales are connected to quantum fluctuations at the smallest scales before the expansion, basically the bang of the Big Bang. And yet nobody seems to get how fundamental this is. Story 23, that in 2022, we achieved net positive fusion energy, or Q equals 1. More recently, we've gotten Q equals 2.3. We did it on 1970 laser technology. Our modern stuff just needs to be technically proven in this high power setup. Just need to make the cheap industrial high power lasers and array towards a reaction chamber. We could have real fusion power plants in the next 5 to 10 years. Story 24. Scientists made synthetic life, edited genes with CRISPR, and messed with memories in mice. We detected space-time ripples, found a new organ, and the universe is expanding faster than it should. An interstellar object even passed by. Some thought it might be alien. Wild stuff, and barely anyone noticed. Story 25. I also found the discovery of exoplanets so fascinating. BC, we are still discovering them as we speak. I read that early philosophers were speculating exoplanets existed, and now we have confirmation with technology. I just find it so fascinating. It makes me think of all the things we speculate on now that future technology and humans will discover when we are far gone. Story 26. I've already forgotten the facts and I need to catch up, but I'm reading a course on ecological restoration. I had to read too much about the global environmental situation, and it's just sad. It's sad. Neither politicians nor business people are aware of the current reality. They think they can continue as they've done for years, that nothing will happen, and when they've made money, they'll simply live comfortably with the tamed money while others suffer, as they've always done. But that's not the case. If no one does something, and I'm talking about those who run the world in one way or another, our species will become extinct, not as Hollywood shows, which will be sudden, but due to the simple exhaustion and fatigue of our species. Fewer children, less intelligence, more diseases, shorter life expectancy, the simple exhaustion of our species until it becomes unsustainable. It's just sad, and no one really knows how we are. Well, understanding it is complicated, and those who can do something don't want to. Story 27. My girlfriend has Hashimoto and her thyroid is basically non-existent anymore. She only has to take one small pill in the morning to live a normal life instead of being dead by now. Millions of people in this world take one small pill each day and are able to live with a disease that would have been deadly back in the day. Story 28. Not a scientist, but it blows my mind we casually walk around with devices that can show us where we are within a few feet anywhere on Earth and how to get to anywhere else. GPS, LED, screens, lithium batteries, and CPUs. Sometimes it's the combination that creates something mind-blowing. Story 29. Dating based around TMM/DD instead of MM/DD/ please let me die now. Does anyone have any idea how much of a time save it is when you're inputting any data files into a computer? Just one click and you have a neat chronological list of all files bunched together with similar topics. But folks in the States get so mad whenever you put the year first instead of the month. Story 30. We basically cured most people of cystic fibrosis in the last 5 years. It is the most miraculous medical breakthrough I can think of. In the span of 5 years, millions of cystic fibrosis patients saw their projected lifespans go up to normal. The treatments don't work on every CF mutation, but they are incredible. The Atlantic published an article last year that made me sob. Story 31, not really a discovery, but we had testimony in Congress last year that the US Gov has recovered alien craft and bodies and is running the most sophisticated cover-up in human history. People not only shrugged and ignored what he said, they fervently refused to even entertain the possibility that it could be true, despite decades of evidence all pointing in the same direction. In fact, you may even see people ridicule the possibility in the responses to this very comment. That's part of how the cover-up works. Make something seem so impossible that people refuse to believe it or even entertain the idea. Story 32. Still a lot more to do here, but we recently discovered a potential explanation for how environmental and metabolic factors influence the expression of certain genes in our DNA, amyloid proteins. This is remarkable because it partially redeems long-debunked genetic theorists like Lamarck, Lysenko, and Ivan Michurin, who thought environmental factors were the primary drivers of heritability and believed DNA was oversold in this regard. Problem was that once we better understood DNA, we slightly overcorrected and dismissed environmental/metabolic influence in favor of DNA exclusive thinking. But that has always failed to fully explain a few things. Recentish studies have shown things like heritability in alcoholism, which was poorly explained by DNA, but is explained by DNA methylation and amyloid proteins, which can essentially cause certain genes within your DNA to express more strongly or less strongly, or even switch off entirely. Basically, it turned out the truth was, and always has been, a mix of both. Dismissing the primacy of DNA was foolish for the Lamarckist/Maturinist faction of scientists, but mainstream researchers also made a huge blunder in dismissing the opposing school of thought for so long as well. Story 33, an oldie but a goodie, stellar spectroscopy. Because of quantum mechanics, when light passes close to an atom, sometimes the electrons in change orbital, they either emit or absorb photons. On a galactic scale, if you've got lots of atoms, that can add up to a lot of light, but electron orbitals have a specific energy depending on the element, and only photons of exactly that energy can be absorbed, and photon energy is determined by wavelength, and we know the element's characteristic wavelengths very well. So that adds up to a lot of extra, or a lot of missing photons that travel all the way across the universe to our telescopes. So we essentially know what elements are in stars and the intervening media from hundreds of light years away on the largest scale known to man, because of the interaction of the smallest scale known to man. Story 34. Not a scientist, but a student here, central pattern generators. Neuroscientists figured out that our spine can generate rhythmic movement patterns, such as walking, without brain involvement. This is currently being explored for treatment options for spinal cord injury. The local researcher with a lab dedicated to this came to my neuroscience class last semester and did a guest lecture on it. He thinks we're within 20 years of people paralyzed from psi being able to walk again with an electric implant. I think about this at least once a week and have never heard this mentioned by non-neuroscience people. Story 35. Two things come to mind. First is the Alcubierre warp drive. This should have been much bigger news, especially when NASA made a working miniature version to test. Next is a headline from last week that a former NASA engineer has developed a way to negate gravity's effects. He claimed it uses combustionless space launch vehicles powered by the Earth's magnetic field. Story 36. Think how long ago that was and how many other crises have come along since. Treatments for HIV/AIDS just gradually became more and more effective. The fact that people don't talk about it is testament to how effective the treatments are now. People don't talk about smallpox and polio anymore either. You still see commercials on TV for HIV treatments though. Story 37, published in late 2024, was a study showing that silicates played a catalytic role in the formation of amino acids and protocells, taking a huge step in validating abiogenesis as the origin of life. Basically, they redid the Miller-Urey experiment, which already showed simple organic compounds could emerge from inorganic compounds in conditions similar to early Earth, with a difference. In order to avoid external interferences, they coated the container with Teflon and put it in a dark room. What happened was nothing. No reaction occurred. No new compounds were formed, contrary to the original experiment. Since the container in the original experiment was glass, they decided to add a few silicate pellets in their container and redo the experiment. The results were even better than expected. They obtained fully formed amino acids, not just simple organic compounds. Among these amino acids were the 5 that make up DNA and RNA. Fully closed phospholipid chains, aka empty protocells, were observed. Story 38. The doctors in London who proved cholera was bacteria in water. It wasn't the result of odors or bad smells, as it were. Just by mapping where the cases were in relation to which street water pumps Populace, angry with them as one of the wells had the nicest water, removed the pump handles, cases went down, then disappeared. Until then, cholera and many diseases, malaria, mal means bad, so bad air, thought to be the cause of airborne smells. Of course, a few like TB or droplet carried. Story 39, photovoltaics. To think we can make a panel that has no moving parts or fuel requirements, but can generate usable energy, leading to a cleaner environment and providing offsets to reduce oil, coal, gas, baseload power consumption. Story 40. There are several electric cars in the 1800s. Long before Tesla, the company, electric vehicles existed in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. They were quiet, clean, and easy to drive, but they lost out to gas-powered cars because of range limitations and aggressive fossil fuel industry marketing. If we'd stuck with them, the climate crisis might look different today. Nikola Tesla's wireless energy transmission. Tesla dreamed of wirelessly transmitting electricity to power the world for free. He even built a massive tower, Wardenclyffe, to do it. But his backers pulled out when they realized they couldn't meter or monetize the energy. Imagine global wireless power in the 1920s, the Antikythera mechanism, an ancient Greek device over 2,000 years old, discovered in a shipwreck that functioned like an analog computer to predict celestial movements. It was largely ignored for decades until modern reconstructions revealed its shocking complexity. Ancient sci-fi, basically. The invention of MP3. Karl-Heinz Brandenburg created the MP3 format in the 1980s. It revolutionized music compression, but record labels ignored it, thinking it had no future. Ironically, pirates and Napster made it explode. It could have changed the industry way earlier if embraced properly. Story 41. Electricity. It's the magic system of our world building. We turn a wheel in one place, convert that physical energy into magic, send the magic energy 1,000 miles away, and it turns the wheel in your fan. I can turn this wheel and make your house light up. I can beam this down to you from a satellite. I can capture the spirit of a river, bend it to my will, and run 1,000 factories. I can put this river spirit soul into a soul container you can carry around and charge things off. How is it not magic? We got way too used to this. Story 42, optogenetics. The neuroscience research community has been massively transformed over the past 10 years because of the advent of channel rhodopsins in combination with cell-specific targeting strategies and fluorescent sensors. These CHARs are special proteins that originate from microorganisms and basically function as light-gated switches that can activate or inactivate neurons that express them. There are different flavors of CHARs that can excite or inhibit neurons. A researcher can, on many different timescales, selectively activate or inactivate a genetically defined specific population of neurons in awake, freely moving, behaving animal subjects, simply by illuminating the neurons with specific wavelengths of light. This allows us to causally link brain activity to behavior. We have been able to learn so much about motivation, addiction, social behaviors, motor coordination, memory, fear, learning, except with these fantastic tools. Story 43. I read recently where South Korea's scientists found a way to revert a colon cancer cell to an almost normal cell, which would eliminate the need for chemo. Early stages, but wow, why aren't we all over the moon and helping research? Story 44. That tax breaks for the wealthy do not lead to the economic trickle-down effects that have always been claimed by proponents. This study by Hope and Limburg basically refuted the last 40, 50 years of right-wing economic policy. I don't ever want to hear one politician mention tax breaks for the wealthy ever again. Story 45. Atom transfer, radical polymerization, ATRP, and radical addition fragmentation chain transfer, raft polymerization. We use a lot of polymers today. However, to date, there has been no commercial use for any polymer that uses a reversible deactivation radical polymerization, RDRP, to date. Despite this, nearly all research-based techniques use a RDRP technique due to the molecular weight control low dispersity. The polymer chains are roughly the same size and livingness, ability to restart the polymerization and continue the reaction. Many commercial polymers use uncontrolled radical polymerization techniques, and many more use conventional step growth polymerization techniques. However, modern polymer research is almost exclusively RDRP. In simple terms, we have gotten a lot better at controlling polymerizations that are uncontrolled. There is untold potential in these techniques and optimistic perspective of synthetic biomimicry. Regardless, the ability to reduce polymer variability has exponentially grown our ability to understand polymer parameters. The ability to control a radical reaction is unbelievable. Story 46. An oldie but a goodie, stellar spectroscopy. Because of quantum mechanics, when light passes close to an atom, sometimes the electrons change orbital. They either emit or absorb photons. On a galactic scale, if you've got lots of atoms that can add up to a lot of light, but electron orbitals have a specific energy depending on the element, and only photons of exactly that energy can be absorbed. And photon energy is determined by wavelength. And we know the element's characteristic wavelengths very well. So that adds up to a lot of extra or a lot of missing photons that travel all the way across the universe to our telescopes. So we essentially know what elements are in stars and the intervening media from hundreds of light years away on the largest scale known to man because of the interaction of the smallest scale known to man. Story 47. Something not medical. I saw someone who modified an iron catalyst to turn carbon dioxide into higher alcohols. Even ethanol would have been huge because it's industrially done by ethylene oxidation, super costly. And don't even think about stuff like decanol. As far as I know, nothing came of it. Next theme. What is something that people commonly think is true that is actually a myth? Story 1. Many people still think that schizophrenia is the same as multiple personality disorder, which is actually extremely rare. Not true, never was. Story 2. The word factoid does not mean a little-known fact. In fact, it means completely the opposite. It's an item of unreliable information that is reported and repeated so often that it becomes accepted as fact. Story 3. When re-entering the atmosphere, most of the heat generated by the space shuttle is not caused by friction, it's adiabatic heating caused by rapidly compressed air. Adiabatic, stricken by popular demand. But it may be too late. Thanks for all the good science in the comments. Story 4. Holding B and down on the D-pad does not actually increase your chances of catching a Pokemon. Guys, seriously, I'm not going to sit here and argue this with all of you. I'm glad you've all got your stories, but your evidence is nothing but a mixture of confirmation bias and coincidence. There are no button combinations that make it easier to catch Pokemon. Whether or not you catch a Pokemon is determined by its catch rate and the effectiveness of the ball you're using. That's all there is to it, and that's all seriously. However, don't take this to mean that I'm not enjoying the stories of the crazy tricks you used to employ. Those are great. This video is coming to an end. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. This was Vanture. See you next time.